This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And today's guest definitely spells his name correctly. Welcome singer Marc Broussard to the podcast family. And man, does he have soul. His voice reminds you of the greats like Otis Redding, Al Green, and Sam Cooke. Mark talks about the movie that started his career at the ripe old age of 5.5, and the influence of his dad, Louisiana Music Hall of Fame inductee Ted Broussard. And he tells me about how he got his first record deal and why he asked to be released from it. That started the story of how Mark went independent and began his series of SOS albums recorded for various charities. Mark even wrote a children's book as a companion piece for one of those albums. He's released his latest SOS album with a focus on the blues. To that end, he recruited his good friend and blues guitar legend Joe Bonamassa to help out. This album pushed Mark out of his comfort zone, but in doing so, he's received some of the highest praise of his career, particularly from his peers. He's learned a lot throughout his career, and he shares a lot of it here, particularly about the writing process that he goes through. He's on tour constantly, as we learn, so check him out on Instagram at Marc Broussard for tour dates. Pick up SOS4 Blues for Your Soul at ktbarecords.com or wherever you get music. Follow us at Performance ANX on social media. Pick up our stuff at performanceanx.threadless.com or send coffee money at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. Now prepare to get lost in Marc Broussard's voice on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Okie dokie. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Marc Broussard here, and I am on the Performance Anxiety Podcast with my dear friend Mark Shea. I'm here promoting my newest album, SOS4 Blues for Your Soul. It's a charity album that I did with a buddy of mine named Joe Bonamassa. You might have heard of that guy. Stick around. Mark, you there?
Yes, how you doing?
I'm great, brother. How are you?
Oh, good. Oh, this is awesome. Before we get started, I want to congratulate you on spelling your name correctly.
Yeah. But it's not really my deal. That was my parents.
Well,
but I'll pass it on.
My dad's, I'm a second, and my son is now a third. So.
Oh wow.
So so apparently, I guess we should thank my grandparents.
Did you all go by Mark?
Yeah, and that's it. It's just Mark Shea. We have no middle name or anything.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not short for anything. It's just that's what it is.
Heard that. Well, it's a pleasure to see you, buddy.
Oh, you too. Thank you, man. I've been going back and listening to so much stuff, and I'm blown away by it. It's incredible. Let me just fill up my glass here. Got cracked open something new yesterday, so I'm gonna give it a taste. Oh, you
son of a bitch. I might have to go make myself something in a minute.
Go right ahead. Like I said, we're in no rush. But I've never had this before last night, I should say. So it's a variant of Grand Marnier. So it's a nice little brandy.
Okay.
Vanilla in it. I
like vanilla.
It's called Navon.
I like vanilla a whole lot in my whiskey.
Yeah. This was a birthday present from my mother. So
nice gal.
So yes.
She's a nice gal.
She's also cheers.
Cheers, brother.
Oh, that's good. That's definitely a lot of vanilla in there.
Is it a whole lot?
It is. Not in a bad way, but you know how Grand Marnier is a little more orange forward? This is way more vanilla forward.
All right.
So let's dive into this. And the way I'd like to usually start is from the beginning. Let's like to discuss how you got to where you are, how you got from being a kid to releasing the SOS4 album. So
yeah, sure. I can regale you. It's a story I've told many times. So my father is a musician, and his father was a musician as well. And my dad would book this gig down in Destin, Florida, to kind of help offset the costs of our family vacation every year. So we would go on vacation. And he would book this gig down there. Well, a few days before we'd left for that vacation, when I was about 5.5 years old. So this would have been probably somewhere around 1987. We were watching Back to the Future. Back to the Future had made it onto TV for the first time. And so my brothers and I were watching Back to the Future. And I saw Michael J. Fox. I saw Marty McFly perform Johnny B. Good.
Right.
And I was just repeating the hook over and over again. Johnny be good. Johnny be good. And my dad said, you want to learn that song, son? I said, yeah, Daddy, I want to learn it.
Nice.
So the next day he comes home with the lyrics and teaches me all the words. I memorized the words pretty quickly. He started playing. I started singing in key. He ran it again. He said, let's do it one more time. And on the second verse, the second time we ran through it, on the second verse, he modulated up a half step and I followed him.
Okay, so can you, not being a musician, can you kind of explain what that means, modulating it up a bit?
Yeah, you're just changing the key up a half step. So you're taking it, from one key. If it's in A, you would be taking it up to B flat. And then he modulated again, another half step up to B on the third verse, and I followed him again.
Wow.
And that was just an indication that I had a decent ear, that I could hear the keys that I needed to be singing in. And that excited my dad quite a bit. So he put me on stage that very weekend in Florida. That was my first performance ever.
Oh, wow.
At 5.5 years old. And then I would just kind of like pal around with him on occasion, because he wasn't a full-time musician. He was a full-time contractor, a home builder, but played on the weekends. And on occasion, when the venue was appropriate, I would go along with him. I'd help him carry some guitars and guitar amps. And if the opportunity arose, I would be able to get up on stage and sing. So I was performing from 5.5 years old all the way throughout my childhood on a fairly regular basis. I wouldn't say more than about a dozen times a year, but that was enough for a kid like me to get a good feel for what the stage felt like. And
and not have stage fright. I mean, if you don't know any better, you know.
Exactly. I actually say that a lot. I say that I was on stage before I even understood what social anxiety was.
Yeah.
So I've always felt very, very comfortable going up on the stage. Never had a problem with it at all.
And your dad is actually in the Louisiana Music Hall of Fame, because he was in the Boogie Kings, right?
That's right. He was inducted with the Boogie Kings, and back in, I think it was somewhere around 1993, right around the time he actually got out of that band. The Boogie Kings is sort of a legacy band that has been around these parts, around South Louisiana and Southern Texas for, I don't know, something like 70 years. They've been around since the 1950s.
Oh my God.
And they just kind of had a revolving door of musicians come in and out of that band. But my father was in it for a number of years, and I got to perform with those guys as well. I think I might be the only member that they ever unofficially inducted into what they called the FBKOA, the Future Boogie Kings of America.
Yeah. First and only member.
That's right. That's right.
So, in doing the research, I think you may have to correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the websites I go to get a lot of my information is Discogs. And according to Discogs, you wrote your first song right out of the womb. So they list your first credit as in 1982 as a writer for the Portuguese release by an artist named Ariane. The song is, and I'm going to butcher this, but Nuat Evida. So congratulations.
Yeah, that wasn't me.
That's quite. Are you sure? I mean,
I'm positive.
I've only had one person who remembers being born on this show, and so.
No way. So you got somebody that remembers being born?
You will not believe who it was. Well, you might once I tell you.
Oh, man.
I'll give you one
Marilyn
guess.
Manson?
No. Richard
Maynard?
Lloyd. Richard Lloyd from Television.
What?
Yeah. He swears he remembers being born.
Yeah, I also met a gal years ago who swore she was 3 months post-term. That her mother held on to her for another 3 months. Yeah, I'm gonna take that one with a grain of salt.
Maybe we should get them together. But Richard was one of my most interesting episodes. Decided like 30 minutes in, he's like, I gotta go in a few minutes. And I'm like, okay, we haven't even hit on television yet. We haven't talked about television. So it was that. But
sounds interesting.
He's the only guy I knew that ever got punched in the face by Jimi Hendrix. So
wow.
So yeah,
interesting life this guy's had.
He blew up a Chinese. Yeah, this was about the time he wrote a book about all of this stuff, and this was about that time, and it was just insane. The stories he was telling. It was worth the weirdness. So
I bet.
Very high stakes.
I like characters. I do like characters. Louisiana's ripe with them, especially the city of New Orleans.
Oh yeah.
People some of the most interesting characters from around the world end up in New Orleans. So I enjoy some of those folks sometimes.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PERFORMANCEANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. So singing for you was first and foremost then. Were you trained? I mean, did your dad have you take lessons, and did that branch into instruments at that time when you were a kid?
No, so I definitely joined. There was a children's choir through the local university here. Back then it was USL, the Raging Cajuns. Now it's ULL.
Oh yeah.
But there was a children's choir ran by the choir director at UL, and I was involved in that for a very brief period when I was probably in the fourth or fifth grade. I switched to a public school that had an actual choir in the sixth grade, and I joined choir, and I was in choir and show choir throughout my school years from that point on. That was really the only formal education that I had ever had with regards to singing, though.
Wow.
No private lessons with anybody. I did do some private lessons once I became a professional with certain vocal coaches who, man, it's so odd. Vocal coaches are some of the strangest people on planet Earth.
Really?
Oh yeah, man. They're very, very odd human beings.
Oh my,
but can be they can be very useful in a pinch for sure. And the latest vocal coach that I worked with happened to be the least weird of them all. He's a fantastic guy named Marc Baxter.
Okay.
I did one session with Marc Baxter. It was $150 for a session, and it's the best $150 I ever spent. He gave me two warm-ups that I've used for, I think it's been 5 years or so now, and those two warm-ups have saved my career in every way conceivable.
That is high praise. That's amazing, because your voice is insane.
Well, thank you, Mark.
It's funny because I started playing the new album for my wife, and she just got completely blown away. She's huge into people like as I am, but she loves, like, Otis Redding is her favorite of all time.
Oh wow!
And Sam Cooke, and so when she heard you, she was just like, her jaw dropped. So it was, I did the jaw drop, and then as I'm doing that, I'm like, that really doesn't work on a podcast. I better describe what I'm doing.
You know, I grew up listening to those guys, and oftentimes when I get to sing their songs, these are songs that I've been living with for way longer than songs that I've written myself. So I feel like a much deeper connection with some of the material that I've been able to cover versus my own material. Much, much deeper connection.
That is so strange. That's a strange thing to hear, but it makes sense.
Sure.
Because you've had those songs since you were a kid, and you've only been writing songs for, well, I shouldn't say only been writing songs. You've been writing songs for a shorter period than you've been listening to songs. So I guess that makes
sense. Exactly. And I've sung those songs, in my head a billion times over, and worked out different little phrases and different runs and whatnot. I've been inspired at times when I'm singing those songs in my head. And it takes years. It really does take years of having strong relationships with songs like that for you to get inspired sometimes to step outside of what was put down and at the jump.
And imagine as a young artist getting on stage, you don't have your own repertoire to sing yet. So you're singing these classics.
Oh yeah, man. The SOS project, for those that don't know, I was on major labels for the first half of my career. And I never saw any of the record revenue from those record deals because of the calculus of a record deal.
Right.
I never recouped, so I never saw that money. When I went independent in 2013 or so, all of a sudden I had this new revenue headed my way. And it was revenue that I had never leaned on for my family's needs. And so even though I wasn't necessarily like bursting at the seams with cash at the time, I felt some sort of a moral compunction to, I don't know, fix the karma on those dollars, if you will.
I can understand
And we decided to go ahead and instead of keeping the lights on in office buildings in New York and LA, decided to keep the lights on for people that actually needed to keep their lights on. So we started making these covers albums as part of what's called the SOS series. And it's been more of a blessing for me than it's been for anybody else, wow. I think. Lots of unintended benefits that I never foresaw at the beginning of the project have come to fruition. Oh, wow. Not to mention the fact that I get to sing some of the baddest music on planet Earth.
And with some amazing people, too.
Some incredible people. But it's also given me the opportunity to really get involved philanthropically. And that's been a big driver for me. As far as just having some sort of a purpose inside this business, because it can get sort of self-involved if you let it. I was definitely very, very self-involved and ego-driven for most of my life. So to have something, an outlet that we can use to give the fans a little bit more incentive to come to the merch table and spend some money, it's just been all around. It's been an incredible experience for sure.
Even before the SOS project started, I want to find out a little bit more about how we got to that point, because I was looking and your first release was at age 20. And that was independent as well, right?
That's correct. Momentary Setback.
Okay.
Was sort of, it was necessary because I didn't really have much going on prior to that. And I had met with some labels out on the West Coast earlier that year. In fact, I was in LA for the first time, meeting with labels from January 27th to February 3rd of 2002. Okay. But I had like 3 songs. I hadn't really sold very many tickets. I had no product, so I didn't have any history of sales to show the labels, and they just didn't have enough to chew on. Okay. So they sent us back to the drawing board. I found out that my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, was pregnant for our first child on February 2nd of 2002. So the day before I came home from that trip.
Man.
And I just assumed that the gal that had flown me out there, a woman named Leah Simon, who was from my hometown but had made her career in the music business, I figured that once she found out that I was having a kid, that she probably wouldn't want anything to do with me. So I came home, told my parents I was having a kid, told my dad that, I didn't think that Leah was going to be interested in signing me or doing anything with me, helping me anymore.
Right.
And my dad said, okay, well, look, I'll produce a record on you. We'll make an album together.
Wow.
So I called up Leah and said, hey, thank you for everything. I really appreciate it, but my dad's going to make a record. And she says, okay, let's do it.
Wow.
I got the producer. I'll do it. And she founded a record label for the sole purpose of putting that album out.
Slow down, boy. Relax. Momentary setback. Don't take it so fast. Slow down, boy. Relax. Don't make it back. Get fast in a hurry, yeah. Standing at the water's edge.
And luckily, by the time 9 months later, when we put that album out, I already had Island Def Jam chomping at the bit to sign us. And
oh, wow.
We had, we debuted around here. We had a big old CD release party where I was able to sell a bunch of tickets and a bunch of albums and sort of prove my worth to Island Def Jam, who had flown my A&R girl, the woman that would become my A&R gal, Diana Fragnito. They had flown her down for that big CD release party. I had management in place by that point. So everything kind of worked out. And without Leah's guidance through that process, I definitely wouldn't be here talking to you. So then I make an album for Island Def Jam called Karen Crow. That was my second release.
Right.
And it sort of put me on the map. I was able to get on tour with Maroon 5 and Gavin DeGraw in those early days.
Jeez.
And we were like a rocket ship. All of a sudden, I thought that we had arrived. I thought that, it was a gravy train that was never going to stop.
Headed straight toward the dawn. When I get there, you better be ready to rock steady. When I get there, you better be ready to rock steady. Ooh, I think I feel like sleeping.
Unfortunately, there was a massive shift in the executive structure at Island Def Jam after that album came out. Leor Cohen gets tapped to take over for Atlantic Records. Subsequently, he starts pulling all of his favorite people out of the company. So I got a new A&R person by the end of the process, a new CEO, a new head of A&R, a new general manager, a new product manager. Everybody that I worked with at the label was gone. I made a second album, second attempt for Island, and the new CEO, L.A. Reid, said that the record was too urban. He didn't want to release it. He didn't want to put it out.
Wow.
So I asked to be dropped. I asked to be let go from my contract.
That's amazing.
They agreed to let me go, but they decided that I couldn't take the album that I had just recorded.
So what happened to that? Is it still just sitting on the shelf somewhere, or did any of that ever become any of these songs you've done since?
We re-recorded some of those things, but I had, not only could I not take the album, but I also had a non-compete. I couldn't re-record that album for another 8 years.
Wow.
So I was in a bind. I was in just a sort of a pinch. Karen Crow had been out for like 3 years by this point.
Right. Yeah.
The tour promoters weren't really buying a show from us because we didn't have anything else going on to promote. We didn't have a record label behind us pushing an album.
Oh my God.
So I was kind of desperate, and somebody suggested, let's do a soul covers album. And it was something that was easy to do, quick and fairly cheap to be able to knock out. So we decided to go in the studio before we actually had a record deal in place for that album. I was in negotiations with Concord, who had just bought Stax and was planning on re-releasing SOS 1 on Stax's 50th anniversary. I thought it was a match made in heaven.
Wow.
I made the album before I finalized that record deal. And once I turned it into the CEO of Concord, John Burke, he took a listen to it and said, "You didn't do anything different. There's nothing different about these arrangements. The press is going to eat you alive. I'm sorry, I don't want to sign this record."
Oh my God.
Which, is whatever. We found Vanguard stepped into the breach, sight unseen. They said, "We don't care what the album sounds like. We just want to work with you. Here's some more money. Here's more money than Concord was offering. Let's do it." And so it was a one record deal, and it was very successful. It was extremely successful. It brought us over to Europe for the first time. And got us out of this stagnation that we had been in for about a year prior. And that led, funny story, Kevin Welk, who was the CEO of Vanguard at the time. Again, it was a one record deal. So they wanted to sign me to a subsequent deal. But Kevin tells a story about going to a CEO golf tournament where Leor Cohen, who had originally signed me at Island Def Jam, but was now at Atlantic by that point, Leor Cohen walks in on Kevin and Rick Krim, who ran VH1, who's an old friend of mine, walks in on Kevin and bragging to Rick Krim about my new record, SOS 1, and saying how excited he is to sign me to a subsequent deal.
Nice.
Kevin, the way Kevin tells the story is that Leor heard that story and immediately called his lawyers and said, "Drop the paperwork. We're signing this kid to Atlantic."
Oh, wow.
So I ended up signing a pretty seriously big deal to Atlantic. I think I might have been the only artist that they brought over from Island Def Jam to Atlantic with those folks. I negotiated a very, very powerful position for myself on that record. It's an album called Keep Coming Back. And years later, I heard from my former A&R guy at Atlantic, Greg Nadell, that when he went over to Leor's house to play him that first album for Atlantic, that Leor stared a hole into him for the entirety of the run of the album. and then immediately said, I don't know why the hell I get involved in A&R. So Leo was not very pleased with the album, to say the least.
Better look in your eye. Well, no denying that. Oh, you got me hypnotized. Doesn't matter what you do, I'll keep coming back to you. Do whatever you want to, keep coming back.
But they were obligated to put it out. I didn't have as much creative control over the second album that I did for Atlantic. That was an album called Marc Broussard. It was self-titled, produced by an extremely talented guy and a co-writer of mine, a guy named Jamie Kinney. And after that album came out, my A&R guy started managing Jamie Kinney, and I got dropped from Atlantic. So they liked the album. They just didn't like me.
Oh, my gosh.
I remember watching my daddy play. He was the hero of all my dreams. I said, Daddy, wanna be in a working band. Daddy, wanna be the best I can. He said, keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the prize. One day you'll find there's a light and it shines for you.
Well, one of the things I thought was really cool, and this is going back to after Karen Crow came out, I noticed that when you went on tour, you were recording the shows and then releasing those shows after the show. People could buy the CD of the show they just saw.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I absolutely love that. I would have bought every show I could have seen if bands were doing that.
They were very, very popular merch items, I'll tell you that, and lifesavers for us on those early years, because we might have been getting paid $300 a night, and selling those live albums was definitely a lifesaver. It allowed me to pay my guys, pick up some hotel rooms, feed people. Unfortunately, Island put the kibosh on that once my first album for them came out.
Oh man!
Once Karen Crow was released, they said, "Look, we don't want any competition with this thing at the merch table, so cut that out."
Man, that's crazy. I don't know. Maybe it's just being a fan. I wouldn't consider that competition. To me, it sounds like it's supplementation.
Labels tend to do weird things.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah. They do very, very weird things. I'm actually in the middle of a catalog deal right now with Concord, selling all the things that I own since I went independent, and and we made it ironclad. That there was a deal breaker that I still had the ability to put up covers of my own songs, versions of my own songs as live performance videos on YouTube and Instagram and social media and whatnot. Yeah. And Concord tried to fight us on it. Oh. And we were like, what are you talking about? We're just adding value to the catalog that you're buying. I don't understand why you wouldn't go for it.
It just makes no sense to me.
None whatsoever.
So your studio albums are amazing. I mean, I went back and started listening to these. They're really good. But once you hit A Life Worth Living, that album, I don't know. It sounds like there's just a change in what you're doing. It sounds more mature. Everything from Life Worth Living to now just sounds like the classic albums that you were influenced by, like the Motown stuff and the Stax. It sounds a lot more like that, less produced for a pop single and more for the long haul. If that makes I don't know if that's accurate or fair.
I think, that's one of the highest compliments that I've ever been paid, to be quite honest, because A Life Worth Living is really the moment where I took the reins for my career.
You tell me I'm unfaithful. If that's the way that you feel, then this is gonna be painful. 'Cause it's about to get real. You're telling me to be honest, how I wish I could. 'Cause all I ever wanted was just to be understood.
I was on Vanguard for that release, but I was trying to convince my managers, who were a new management firm that I had just hired prior to that deal. Prior to that, signing that album to Vanguard, I was really trying to convince my managers that we were ready to go independent.
Wow.
They didn't really have the faith quite then. It wasn't until after that album that they were like, you know what, we're done working with these labels. We don't need them. You got it.
Good for them.
But I really took the reins. That album is definitely the first in my catalog where my vision was brought to the table more so than any other.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Another thing that I really like, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but one thing I do want to tell you is that I really love how you incorporate your dad into the music, that he's all over a bunch of these albums. And I love that.
You know, it's a way for me to spend time with my father, which I love doing. It's a way for me to play music with my father, which I love doing. I like being able to go back and listen to my dad and I playing together.
Yeah.
I think that those things are probably going to be immensely valuable as time goes on.
For sure.
So, yeah, and my fans love him. My fans freaking adore my dad. So,
I love your dad.
Yeah, everybody loves the guy. And he loves him back. After shows that we do together, he'll spend 4 hours talking to everybody in the room.
I love that. That is so great.
And I get to pay him back. I get to pay him well. You know what I mean? When he comes in for these sessions and we do shows together, I get to pay him quite well. And
that's good.
Pay him back for all those, all those gas tanks to bring me to soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday and whatnot.
And, being the future Boogie King, the one and only in the club, that's worth something right there.
No doubt about it.
So, and I also like the Christmas album you did. It was just incredible, which also features your dad on it. But the second SOS album comes out, and I've got I guess the first question I want to ask about this is, each one is for a different charity. How do you decide the charity that you're going to give the money to for each different album?
Well, it's kind of all been a little different. For SOS 2, we chose a charity that had we had worked with. We had done a concert for this group called City of Refuge out of Atlanta. And once I found out about what exactly was going on at City of Refuge and realized just how comprehensively they were tackling the issues around homelessness, I realized that it was an organization that I felt really good about not only bringing attention to, but also throwing some money at. So that was a no-brainer. Once I just, I had some inside baseball about how this organization operated, and it was extremely impressive. So I wanted to bring attention to them and help them with some dollars.
Don't you ever be sad. Lean on me when times are bad. When the day comes and you're down in a real trouble and about to drown, just hold up, 'cause I'm coming. Hold up, I'm coming. I'm on my way, your lover. If you get cold, I'll be your cover.
SOS 3. Another kind of inside baseball situation, just because the opening of a St. Jude affiliate children's hospital here in Baton Rouge was kind of a big deal. And it expanded our region's ability to care for chronic and terminal illnesses in children by a ridiculous amount. So that was a no-brainer as well.
Okay.
Throwing, some weight around helping sick kids seemed to be a very, very worthy cause.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To partner with a lullaby album and a children's book.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. If your heart
And then for this fourth album, SOS 4, we're working with Joe Bonamassa and his record label, and they had some experience with this organization called Guitars Over Guns that just aimed to get instruments into the hands of young people so that we could hopefully keep them off the streets. And Joe's team absolutely loves this organization. So they gave it to us on a silver platter.
Wow.
Said we've already got this partnership with them. We'd love to funnel you guys right into that pipeline.
So there's a pretty big gap between the first and the second SOS album. Was that because you were on the major label and there was an issue, or was it? It didn't come
SOS 1 was born out of necessity for us. Mm-hmm. And then SOS 2, 3, 4, and beyond, we're all really born out of necessity or desire to actually get back into the studio with another project, give me some more time in between and original records to do some more songwriting, get some cool songs on tape, and raise money for charities, obviously. So SOS 1, like I said, was just born out of the need for us to get a new product out. And then everything else after that was sort of redirecting that focus, saying, look, this cover album helped get me out of a real serious bind whenever I was in a hole in 2006 or 7. Let's use that same method to get other folks out of a bind.
And you're getting people, some big name people to help you out with some of this stuff. Like, one of my favorite things you've done is These Arms of Mine with Huey Lewis. That, first of all, this is just a cool ass duet. You and Huey Lewis is just amazing. But it's one of the only times I've ever heard anybody cover Otis and do it justice, because it's so hard to cover Otis.
These arms of mine, they are lonely, lonely and feeling blue. These arms of mine, they are yearning from wanting you. And if you would let them hold you, oh, how grateful I will be.
But your voice is, it matches. It's Otis. It's just a replica of Otis Redding. It sounds incredible, and I love it so much. And that's my wife's favorite Otis Redding song. So when she heard that, she was just overwhelmed.
I've been singing Otis Redding since I was a little kid, man. And everybody that fronted the Boogie Kings, every guy that ever fronted the Boogie Kings sang Otis Redding. There was one guy when I was growing up, a guy named Dwayne Yates, who they call the ghost of Otis Redding. He'd do his makeup as white as a ghost as possible and put on big old shades, and he had slick black white hair, and he sounded exactly like Otis Redding. I would say that I do a decent amalgamation, but nonetheless, yeah, I've been singing Otis's music for my entire life. So to be able to do it justice is definitely something that brings me a whole lot of joy.
It's amazing. And you've done stuff with, like, Leanne Rimes has been on your albums. You've been on her albums. Kelly Clarkson used one of your songs during a tour. She played Home. Was it Home that she played during her tour?
Yeah, she played Home for years, I think.
That's incredible. And you had songs being used for the NBA All-Star game. I mean, it's a testament to your talent as a songwriter, but also just the quality of the songs, and just, I guess I'll stay with just a testament to your talent.
Man, it's been an interesting ride. I stayed down here in South Louisiana. I didn't go to Nashville when everybody else was going there. I didn't go to LA at any point. I stayed down here in the swamps, and I'm very grateful for how things have gone, to be quite honest. I can still walk down Main Street with my family in Disneyland and not have to worry about anybody bothering me. But I've also been able to support my family exclusively on music for 20 plus years now. So it's been a very, very interesting journey. I wouldn't change anything about it. I'm looking forward to the next 20. I'll tell you that.
The third one came out, and it's a lullaby collection, and you wrote a companion book for that.
That's right.
And my understanding is that you actually wrote that on a plane trip from my state, Virginia, down to Georgia.
That's right. I was hanging out in Virginia. My dad and I do this concert every year at this beautiful resort in Orange, Virginia. And I had worked with this fella that had produced a few performances that we had done out there. He had filmed a few of the performances for various productions. Oh. A guy named Kurt Zenzian, and Kurt's wife is an illustrator, and she and I had talked for years about working on a book together. And finally, we were together again after a few years of not seeing each other. We were there at the Inn at Willow Grove. And I said, you know what? It's time. I'm going to do an SOS lullaby album, and we're going to put a book together. And the flight home on the leg between DC and Atlanta, I got inspired, wrote the book, sent her the copy. We made some minor edits, and we were off to the races. She turned in the illustrations pretty quickly. Gosh. And I became a published author of children's books.
That is amazing. That is so
it was
awesome.
I love the book. The book is great. I think I have a copy somewhere here. I don't see it. The book is fantastic. It's one of the most successful merch items that we've ever had. Almost no one that comes to merch leaves without that book.
Oh, wow. And
from what I understand, the little kids absolutely love the book as well. There's a bunch of animals. You can find all the animals in there.
Oh, cool.
It's a beautiful message. It's a story that I got inspired based on a relationship that I have, a friendship that I have with a young lady from Alexandria, Louisiana, who's got cerebral palsy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So her and her family started showing up at my shows a long time ago, and I've gotten close with the entire family, and thus discovered a little bit more about that condition, and realized that I was probably in school with some kids that I recall. Like I remember kids in wheelchairs and nonverbal.
Yeah.
Those kids were probably dealing with cerebral palsy, and had I known what I know now about that condition, I probably would have made at least overtures to friendship with those kids when I was in school. And I just wanted to kind of educate the young ones about the fact that there are folks out here that look and behave differently than us, but that are nonetheless still worthy of love and friendship. And so the book is called I Love You for You. And it basically is from the perspective that says, no matter if you've had a bad day or the best day of your life, I love you for you. If you can see to the moon, or if you need big old glasses, I love you for you. And so, yeah. That's
beautiful. Oh, and you do some really cool songs on it. I mean, Moon River, classic.
Never thought I would sing that song.
Really?
I never in my wildest dreams thought I would sing that song.
It's amazing. That and Return to Pooh Corner, Sweet Baby James.
I've been singing that song since I was a teenager. My dad and I used to do that one together. We still do. So that was a guarantee.
Yeah.
Pooh Corner for sure. But no, Moon River, I heard Andy Williams' version of Moon River, and then all of a sudden I was just kind of fixated and couldn't shake it out of my head.
Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever.
And getting away from Andy Williams on that album from top to bottom was tough for me to do, to be quite honest. I just wanted to croon it all.
Oh, I'll bet. I mean, that's the quintessential version.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I've always fascinates me about covers is you can do it so many different ways. And I don't care as long as you do it well. I don't care if you're faithful to the original or you completely make it your own, as long as it's genuine and you can hear that you're giving it the respect it deserves. I love it.
We always try to, pay homage and pay respects where respects are due, because again, these are songs that people have lived with, that the fans in some cases have lived with for decades.
Yeah.
And we don't want to just go crapping all over them. You want to pay them the kind of respect that they deserve. So yeah, we always go into these projects with that intention, and hopefully it comes across.
Well, it definitely does. It's in the new SOS 4 album, which is a blues focused album, and the other ones haven't necessarily been blues focused, and this one has 11 tracks, and it's. And before we get into it too deeply, Joe Bonamassa is all over this thing, and he's been a friend of yours for years. How did you meet up with Joe and start working with Joe?
Well, I've known Joe for years. I performed on his cruise out of Fort Lauderdale probably 10 years ago or more, and we've been acquaintances since then. But one of my best friends and my very first sideman is also now Joe's bass player. He wasn't whenever we started this project. He was, however, doing some horn and string arranging for Joe for the last several years. So when I called him and talked to him, because he's my best friend, I called him to talk to him about doing this blues album, for SOS. He said, man, I think you should reach out to Joe and Josh. They've been producing all kind of blues records. I'm sure they would love to get on this project with you.
Wow.
I said, well, look, you grease the wheel from your side. I'll hit up the boys from my side, and we'll see how it shakes out. And those guys jumped on board immediately. It didn't take more than a few text messages to tell them what the plan was.
Oh, that's incredible.
And even after I said, look, we're giving the money away for this thing, is that all right? Joe said, absolutely. Let's put it out together. It would not have gone as well. This album would not have gone as well as it has had those guys not been at the helm and helping guide the process, because the blues has always been in my wheelhouse, but it's not my area of expertise. So without their influence, I would have been in deeper waters than I'd care to be swimming in alone,
Well, I can understand, because the EP you put out a little while back, It Must Be the Water. That, I love that. It sounds like if Stevie Wonder was Creole. It's just a cool ass mix of sounds. I love it.
The city's on fire, underwater, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. I am someone you know, never thought I'd have to come and knock on your door. I am someone you know, river push me down, but I ain't ready to go. I am someone you know.
And so that makes sense when you say that blues isn't, you do it, but it's not what you would normally do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more Bobby Womack than Bobby Blue Bland, and I know those catalogs. I know the soul catalogs much better than I know the blues catalogs. So I wouldn't have been. I would have just been way out of my depth had I been forced to pick the songs on my own.
How do you pick the songs? Like for example, for this, the SOS 4, how did you go about narrowing things down to 11 tracks?
Yeah, it's typically the same process, and this one was not really any different at the outset. I basically ask all the stakeholders on the project to make a playlist of songs that they might want to hear.
Okay.
I'd cross-reference those lists, and if there are duplications across several lists, those typically will get a green light automatically. But after that, it's sort of a democratic process, and I ultimately have final say, and that's usually just based on, I might pull an audible just because something is easier for me to sing or better suited for me to sing than something else. But yeah, it's usually just a fairly democratic process. SOS 4, Josh and Calvin put together a playlist of about 30 songs. And I believe every single one of the songs that made the final cut came from that single list.
Oh, so wow.
Again, having Josh especially and having his influence and guiding hand was crucial in picking the songs that ultimately made it on this album.
Were there any songs that, when you saw the list, surprised you? Like, why did they pick this song for me to do?
Yeah.
And did those get recorded and put on the album? No.
No. So I think that I think that if I had to guess, and I've never asked, but if I had to guess, Josh put together that playlist in a very specific order to sort of guide me exactly where he wanted me to go. I don't know if that's the truth, but I'd put money on it.
Well, the album is so good.
Well, thank you.
The first tracks are amazing, but for me, it just grabs me with the Little Milton cover, track 3. That's what love will make you do.
Inside together when I see you stroll, lose my self-control. That's what love will do for you. That's what love will make you do. No matter how hard I find it, oh, I'm still in love with you.
Oh my, that guitar tone, everything is just amazing.
Man, it was a tall order. I was kind of scared to sing that song, to be quite honest.
Really?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the first question was, do I really sing it exactly the way Lil Milton did? With a particular, like this particular thing that he kind of does with his throat and his mouth that I don't do naturally, but I can do it. And I can mimic exactly what he's doing, no problem.
Okay.
So that was the first question. And the difference between the two was that I could nail the part and the pitch 100% of the times doing it like he did it. But I was just more myself. It sounded more like me doing it the way that I would do it. But my pitch was a little squirrely at times if I was going for it. So that was the first kind of aesthetic choice on that song that we had to make. But yeah, I mean, it was just a beast of a vocal. He's got such a freight train of a voice that I didn't know that I was, whether or not I was going to be able to do it justice.
Oh, well,
always gave me confidence. Yeah.
Well, the next song, Cutting In, the song's incredible. The guitar tone on that, that whole song sounds like it could have been cut in 1959.
Pardon me, buddy, for being so bold, but this is my girl you're dancing with. Excuse me, partner, for being so cold.
That was one that I really wanted to get my buddy Roddy Romero on. Roddy is a friend of mine from here in South Louisiana. He's actually got a law named after him. Roddy Romero is the reason why I was able to get into bars when I was a kid and perform. It's because the Roddy Romero law, the Roddy Romero bill passed. He was a young phenom when I was growing up, and he was an accordion player and a Zadie Cajun player growing up, but at some point along the way, he picked up a guitar and begged Sonny Landreth to show him how to play slide.
Wow.
And finally, Sonny relented, and Roddy has become one of the finest guitar players that I've ever had the privilege to work with. And he's perfect for that era, especially for that era of music, 1950s dance hall kind of stuff. It's right in his wheelhouse. And thankfully, Joe, being as humble and as gracious as he is, had no issues whatsoever with anybody taking his seat during the project. So I brought Eric Krasno in. I brought my own guitar player. And, when I told Calvin that I was bringing my guitar player, because I adore Bobby Schneck Jr., Calvin, Joe's bass player and my best friend, says, "Oh, you're bringing sand to the beach, huh?" You're bringing a guitar player to a Joe Bonamassa session is not necessarily the smartest thing he ever did. But Joe was very, very gracious and humble and gave up the chair. No issues whatsoever. No ego at play. He was beautiful.
That's amazing. So he's as beautiful as his playing is. Then he
really is a doll of a dude. I love the guy. He's got exceptional taste in musicians, exceptional taste in musical equipment, and an impeccable set of skills and an impeccable set of ears too. So he's an exceptionally genuine cat. It was a joy to get to hang with him for that week that we were together.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if he ever wants to do a podcast, let me know.
I will.
Now, the next song, Dreamer, that is fighting with I Asked for Water for my favorite on the album. Those two songs, they're so different, but I can't decide which is my favorite on the album. It kind of depends on when I'm listening, what time of the day I'm listening or whatever. But that's a lot different than everything else on the album.
What do I say when I'm said goodbye? I think by now I'm wasting time.
It is. It's a little more soul than blues, but because it was Bobby Blue Bland, we could get away with it. One of the best moments since we put this album out, I actually got a text from Bobby Blue Bland's son, Rod.
Oh, wow.
Who's been a friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for a few years. And Rod just sends me a video of him listening to that song, listening to our version and shedding a few tears. And giving me the big thumbs up and telling me that, if his dad was still here, that he'd be grinning from ear to ear listening to me sing that song. So I love Dreamer, and I'm excited about playing it live. We haven't incorporated it quite yet, but we're going to soon.
You can't get a higher compliment than that.
You really can't.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Rod was also in Bobby's band for a decade or more towards the end there. So he would know. He would definitely have a very good handle on as to whether or not his father would enjoy that.
Yeah. So, and then the next one I wanted to mention was basically, I already mentioned it, is the one that's competing with Dreamer is I Asked for Water. That literally, I'm not even joking, not being hyperbolic at all. It gives me chills when I hear it. That's Wolf. I mean, you're channeling Howlin' Wolf. It is just uncanny. That is, I'm getting fun about now thinking about it.
Well, that's what's so fun about these albums is like just putting on that character for a little while and stepping out of my own zone and stepping into somebody else's skin for a second. It's a joy to be able to do it and do it. As soon as I was done with the vocal, Joe came out. I walked out of the vocal booth and Joe was like, dude, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen happen in the music business.
Wow. Oh.
So I love singing that one. It was a lot of fun.
That is incredible. Now, the last two songs, are those covers or those originals? Driving Wheel and When Will I Let Her Go?
Driving Wheel is an Al Green tune.
Okay.
And that was actually the most daunting to sing out of the whole bunch, man. I really? Actually didn't sing it. Yeah, I sang it like 4 months after we finished tracking. Everything else I sang in the studio at tracking. I needed more time with Driving Wheel for sure. It's just so much attitude and so many little nuanced moments because Al is so friggin', it just oozes out of him. Right. He doesn't have to fake it in any way. And so I just needed to spend a little more time with the song so that I also would have a better chance of not having to fake it.
Right.
Go is the only original on the album. So all the SOS albums have one thing in common. That's we, in our hubris, attempt to write an original song that would hopefully stack up next to all those classic hits. And so When Will I Let It Go is the original on this album.
it all went wrong. Tried every day to keep a habit, but every night I'm by myself.
Calvin and Josh presented me with a sort of an instrumental demo of what they were thinking for the original. And Calvin had sort of a hook in mind. And that was all I needed. I was off to the races. I think I wrote the lyrics for that song in probably about 25 minutes.
Oh, wow.
The day that we tracked it.
Man, when it comes, I guess it just comes.
Yeah. Especially when somebody gives me not only gives me the framework of the entire song, but also gives me something that I can sink my teeth into as far as a lyrical hook. Calvin was just like, yeah, when will I let her go? That was kind of all I needed. That paints the whole theme right there in that line for me. So I was able to just jump right in and knock it out.
In doing the research, I've listened to some interviews and all that. That seems to be how some of my favorite songs that you've written come to you. You just align and you work it out from there.
It's happened several times where the song just comes in like it's a message on a wire.
Wow.
Those are very, very interesting times, to say the least, because you feel like a passenger more than a driver. And then there are also plenty of times where you just get inspired by this one little tiny thing, and you have to really dive in. I usually hit a wall in those scenarios around the 45-minute mark. And for most of my career, I would stop there and I would just make a voice memo and put what I had down and come back to it later in a writing session with somebody. Mm-hmm. What I discovered a few years ago is that if I just push through that wall, doesn't take more than about 10 or 15 minutes to get the rest of the tune done. So I've been trying to push through the wall more often lately. And
you just came back. I think you just wrapped up a tour just not too long ago, right?
Man, we're never wrapping up anything. We're always on tour.
Oh, okay. So
I've got a 2-week break right now. I've got a 2-week pause right now, but I'll go to LA after this 2 weeks is over and make another original album with my buddy Eric Krasno, producing an original album on me. Then we'll go to Costa Rica, and then I think we're in Europe for a month. The rest of the year is quite busy. And then I think we're actually planning on going into the studio in January with Joe and Josh again to make an original blues album.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to make another SOS for release next year as well. So I think I'm going to drop 3 albums next year.
Oh, my gosh. That's amazing.
That's the goal.
You'll have to come back and we can talk about them.
I'd love to.
If you're going to do another SOS album, I want to make a request. Shoot. And I know how far these go. Trust me, but humor me. How about Screamin' Jay Hawkins?
All right.
I don't know which song yet. I love Alligator Wine or
All Right.
I Put a Spell on You. I'm open to any Screamin' Jay Hawkins, really. He was just such a unique character.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do for the next one. That's the fun thing about these SOS projects. It's the world is an oyster. I could do a yacht rock SOS. I could do a country SOS.
Nice.
So I don't know yet. The charitable side of the things sort of point the light to actually where we'll end up. I don't know what charity we would have to partner with for a yacht rock album, but New Sperry Topsiders.
Affluenza.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, all right. So I got another idea, and I'll tell you about this real quick because this is something I just did. So I'm putting out a charity album myself.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I actually got a bunch of former podcast guests to record Spinal Tap songs.
That's fantastic.
Because it's a Spinal Tap tribute. Because I had a guy on, and we were talking. His band Das Damen from the 80s and the 90s used to do tons and tons of tribute albums. They're self-described tribute album whores.
I love that.
And they did one for the Ruddles. So we started talking about how that's crazy because the band never existed. So has anybody ever done one for Spinal Tap? And while we're talking, I looked it up and it's no one's ever done a Spinal Tap. I said, maybe I should put one together. He said, if you put one together, my band will contribute a song. All right.
What are you raising money for?
We're sending all the money to Teen Cancer America. So
that's beautiful, man.
That's the charity, it was actually founded, and the podcast network that I'm on has a connection with Teen Cancer America because it was founded by Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend.
That's beautiful.
All the artists contributed songs. My buddy Jordan Zadarozny up in Pembroke from the band Blinker the Star, he does a lot of production. So he's mixing. He's doing 2 mixes, one for a digital download, one for a vinyl release. And
love it.
So, yeah. So maybe
That's
you want to do a
amazing.
Spinal Tap album.
I'm way in.
This will come out probably after your European leg. So I was looking at the tour dates, and I'm a little disappointed because I didn't see any East Coast dates on your website yet. So I'm hoping to see some East Coast tours.
We're coming February and March of next year because we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of my first big major label album, Karen Crow. It's the 20th anniversary. So we've got a big old East Coast tour planned for February through March.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's going to be a ball, man.
Well, I definitely want to come and see. If you come anywhere near the Washington, D.C. area, I live close by. I would definitely.
We'll be there.
All right, I'm there.
We just did 930 Club like 3 months ago.
Oh, damn it. Man, my timing
good.
with you
Don't
is
worry.
all
We're
off.
coming back.
Awesome.
We'll come back. Don't worry.
Good. Well, where can people follow you and find out how to buy the SOS album and support the charities and find your tour dates and support you on your tours?
You can find me at marcbroussard.com. You can find all that information there, as well as all of my social media links. They're all at Marc Broussard. Should be at least. And we're always on tour. We're constantly on tour. So we'll definitely be coming, I'm sure, somewhere near your listeners at some point in the next calendar year for sure.
That's awesome, man. Well, I cannot wait to see you live because your voice is amazing. And it's one of those voices that's just, it's not a studio talent. I mean, you kill it live too, because I've been watching a bunch of videos, the entire Home album. I watched all the videos for that. Your live performance is just incredible. So I am dying to see a show. So.
Man, we have a good time. Bring the dancing shoes.
Yes.
We really do try to have the most fun that we possibly can at the show. Keep it real light. You're not going to hear any kind of political talk from my stage. I'm trying to take you out of all that bullshit. So y'all come out, have a good time, drink a little bit, shake a tail feather. You'll remember. You'll make a memory.
This has been a blast, and it's been an honor chatting with you and hearing these stories. Now, one thing I did hear before I let you go.
Sure.
I have heard that you are a bit of a prankster.
Oh, really?
I heard a couple of stories about fake arresting an uncle and some other stories like this. So is that something that do you have any, is that something you do to your band members too, or?
I don't have a preoccupation with pranking anybody necessarily.
When the opportunity arises.
Yeah, the more elaborate pranks are, they've been like a handful or less. Me mock arresting my uncle, that was the best thing that I ever did. Sometimes I like messing with people. I do like gaslighting people sometimes.
All right.
Making them pretend that I'm making pretend like I'm freaking out and super angry, and then like I'm just messing with you. Don't worry. Well, it makes my tour manager crazy, but that's about it.
Keeps them on their toes.
Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Thanks, Mark. Take care of yourself, brother.
You too. It's a pleasure to meet you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
The time is now. I heard somebody say you have to get better after a while. But I say love, the time is now. Freedom for all, not just for some.